Hello and welcome to this little Painkiller Overdose impression video. My impression will be based on my time with the game. That is that I have completed the main campaign on the difficulty Insomnia, which took me around 8 hours. Painkiller Overdose is a standalone expansion pack to the original Painkiller, and just as its predecessor, it's a fast-paced, arcadey, arena-based first-person shooter. The game do have its story, but it's all done in cutscenes, and I actually skipped all of the cutscenes, so I won't make any comments about the story. However, I have a hard time seeing that the story in a game like this can be any good. Now, one thing that did surprise me a bit about the game was the environments. They're actually kind of cool. Each level has its own visual theme, and they are quite varied overall, the levels. There are some levels that are a bit grey and dull, but overall I was quite pleasantly surprised by the environments in the game and just how varied and cool they were. But with that said though, the levels are basically just one arena after one arena, and it's extremely linear and the exploration is quite limited. There are some hidden ammos here and there, but you don't really get any feeling of exploration or anything like that. Now, each level have also its own personal enemies, which is kind of neat. There are some enemies that are reused and some enemies get reskinned to different levels, but overall it feels like every level has its own enemy and enemy types, and that fits the theme, and I thought that was pretty neat. But with that said, the enemies kind of act the same way for the most part. There are some enemies in the game that require you to have some kind of special tactic and forces you to change your playstyle. But overall the AI is extremely brainless and dumb and predictable. They basically just stands still and shoots at you, or runs up to you and tries to kick you, or runs towards you to get into firing range and then stands still and shoots you. So the AI is kind of boring, and it's pretty much a swarm game where the AI only poses a threat when they are in extreme numbers. And I think this is pretty sad, because this really drags down the game, and I think that the game would benefit greatly from having some smarter enemies. And the combat would also get a lot less stale if the enemies behaved a little bit different from time to time. And the combat does get a bit stale, to be honest. And that is despite the fact that, as I mentioned before, the enemies are quite varied and the environments look quite varied. But the combat does get a bit stale. I think that is partly because of the AI, that it's just too samey and swarmy and brain dead. But also I think it's because of the weapons. Because the weapons in the game are honestly quite weak, which is kind of strange considering the type of game this is. So you got the standard shotgun and the crossbow, which feels and sounds fine, but there are a lot of weapons that really isn't all that fun to use. There is a lot of weapons in the game that just feel weak, and you get bored using them pretty damn fast, and they are definitely not good enough to carry through the entire game. The demon head and the sword feels particularly weak, and even the rocket launcher and the nuclear gun feels quite weak, which is saying a lot. But if you ignore the weapons and the AI, then the combat it's competent. It works as it should. It is very much an arena-based shooter where you are stuck in a small space with a bunch of enemies and have to jump around and shoot at them and so on, and some people might like that, some people don't. Personally I am okay with it, but the brainless nature of it I think could add to the whole. The combat gets a bit stale. Not to mention that people who have played other games in the Painkiller series might recognize the formula quite a bit. One thing that did bug me a bit was that sometimes enemies spawn at just behind you and so on, and I thought that could be a bit annoying at times. The game did have some bosses in it, which is always a nice touch to spice up the gameplay, but to be honest, bosses weren't all that funny to fight against. Basically gigantic bullet sponges. Okay, I guess that was my impression of the game Painkiller Overdose. I had some fun with it. It wasn't perfect, but no game is. Thank you for watching this video, and bye bye.
Tastes like chicken.